afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to all of you on the fourth episode of It's All About You. Wish you all a very happy Republic Day a day later. Republic Day, where rules are set, happened in 1915. Army plays a very important role when it comes to the Republic Day. We have with us Major General Vikram Dev Dogra, Iron Man not once but twice, who, since the beginning of January, has been with us, telling us how to dream big, think big, believe in yourself, and move ahead in life. Learn from the past, learn from all that you experience, move ahead so that you can live the moment and also plan the future. Having understood all of this, how could we not learn about the leadership lessons that military teaches one and all? Because as a army brat myself, as a daughter of an army officer, I saw my own father lead many missions and having taught us so much about leadership. So today, we welcome General Vikram Dev Dogra to talk about the lessons of leadership from the military and a lot more that one can learn from an army personnel and from the forge, as we lovingly call it. So, warm welcome once again, sir, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope your audience is not tired of hearing me again and again, but this is my last talk for a
Don't
while.
worry, we have people who are traveling, who are at the hospital, but yet wanting to hear you. So you have your charms. Don't worry about it.
Yes. Aarti, of course, without her, the talk would not be complete because there would be no questions. So I'm glad she spared the time to log in. And like you said, I'm going to talk about leadership lessons from the military. Well, leadership happens everywhere, and so does it happen in the military. So I will try and correlate what people who are not in the military can pick up from the military, not to say that they're not already doing it. I'm sure everything that's happening as far as leadership is concerned is happening in every facet, whether you are in the corporate or you're in any other organization. But I will flag a few issues which are typical with the military, which may help people as they go along. Now, leadership is a set of personal behaviors that sets the course and creates an environment that energizes people to meet a goal. Being a leader is never easy. And it's even harder in tough times, in times like we are in today, in COVID times. It's therefore essential that we adapt our leadership style to the changing environment, whatever it may be. I'm not talking specifically of the COVID environment, but whatever environment you are facing, you need to adapt your leadership accordingly. The challenge is how you act when things go wrong. In times of great change of or tremendous challenge is when leadership fundamentals matter the most. Leaders need to understand the needs and the desires of whom they lead, of their employees, of the people they command, their will to work, their will to live, their will to revolt, and their will to follow you. This must be clearly understood by the leader. Not that leadership is about winning or losing, but to be a successful leader, you have to firmly understand states of mind. To my mind, everything important, everything human comes down to the states of the mind. And the leader who best understands the states of mind and relating to the communicating states of mind will be the one who will always be successful. And like I said earlier, there are leaders in all walks of life. But some key features of military are, firstly, the military is a very, very diverse organization. We have people from every part of the country, different cultures, different races, different languages, different religions. So there is a huge diversity of the people who make the pool of the military. And therefore, it is one of the basic tasks of military leadership is to amalgamate all these people into a homogeneous lot, into a fine, well-oiled machine where every small cog has a role to play. And so that these people who come from different parts of the country pull in the same direction. Next is the size of the organization. It's huge, 1.3 million. I'm talking only of the army, and then you have the Air Force and the Navy. So it's huge organization, and because it is so huge, people in the military get to command a large number of other people or get the opportunity to lead number of people at different stages of their life. So start right from the time you join the military, at whatever level you join, there is a rank and file which is going to be led by you. So that is another experience which is very unique to the military. The third is that it is a very organized structure. It is a traditional form of structure where there is clarity in the power of delegation across all levels, and there's a strict code of conduct and a strict ethos. And because it is so well organized, really you don't need to spend time thinking about how leadership will move when you are in it. So for those who are not privy to what happens in the military, there are no formal classes or capsules or courses undertaken on how you're going to lead your command. It's all intrinsic. You just learn on the job. The entire environment is such that you learn as you go along. And lastly, leadership is the mainstay of the military and was used there much before researches were conducted in the corporate and in the education field and other places. So actually, you can say that the concept of leadership emanated from the military. And now, of course, it has been honed as per the specific requirements of whichever organization it is now being followed in. Here are some of the things from the military that might be useful to you. Like I said, unity in diversity. We have people coming from all over the country, different cultures, different religions, different languages, and they need to be brought together. Now, how do we do that in the military? So the very basis of this starts from the time when you join the academy. I will speak more of the officers because they are the forefront as far as leadership is concerned. Not to say that the people who are below officer rank don't lead. Everybody, like I said, the moment you join, you have a certain amount of people whom you are leading. But I will be more specific for the officers because they are the people who go up to the final rung of leadership in the army. So how does that happen? The moment you join the academy, when, for example, I joined the National Defense Academy in 1978, January, and we were a bunch of about 250, 260 kids who had just come out of school from a variety of schools. Some are from boarding schools, day schools, scenic schools, central schools, urban, like those, the schools, Catholic schools, and so on and so forth. I mean, there were a whole lot of people, and we were put together into one course. And the first lesson we learned was that it's one for all and all for one. That whatever we do, we have to stand by each other. So to unite us, how we learned that was that if one person made a mistake, the whole course was punished. Now, this course of 260 was, of course, broken into different squadrons that we were in. So in a squadron, there were about 20, 25 people. So even if one person didn't go out and go for class in time, if one person misbehaved, the whole 20 cadets were put through a kind of a ragada or punishment. And that is where the bonhomie develops. So what we call in the civvy street as team building happens on the job in the military. Because it's in the military that you realize that there are no individual gladiators. When you are going to go into an operation which matters as far as life and death is concerned, then everybody's life depends on what the other person does. Your lives depend on each other. For example, I come from an armored regiment. We operate in tanks. And in the current tanks that we have, there are three people. There is a driver, there's a gunner, there's a commander. And the officer is the commander. And in addition to his own tank, he also gets to command other tanks. Now, the survival of each of these tanks depends on all three of the people doing the job properly and being in, you know, in a homogeneous training with each other so that there is an understanding. You don't need to spell out things because it happens automatically. That's the level of integration that is required from the crew. So there is unity in diversity, and that is brought about by facing hardships together, going on difficult missions together, even if it's like running a Josh run, a 20-kilometer run together, or if it is an exercise on survival, jungle survival, and so on and so forth. There are a number of ways. So this is one essential lesson which I feel we must look at when we are not in the military, because I don't see that happening too much, whether it's the corporate or it's any other organization. Everybody is on their own. Taking that a little further, it's military is the only organization where you need to probably be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. And that is, you may need to do things which may demand your laying down your life also. And no amount of money, no amount of perks, no amount of promotions can get a man to lay his life for whatever is the mission. And that drive to do so can only come out of a military ethos or of bonhomie, spirit de corps. And to put it in three words, I would say something called Naam, Namak, Nishan. And Naam is for the honor, for your name, for the name of your unit, for the name of your country. Namak is for the salt that you eat, literally translating it from Hindi, कि मैंने तुम्हारा नमक खाया है. So for the namak, and that is for the what the country has been giving you, and for the nishan, and that's the flag of your country and the flag of your unit. So these three things can actually galvanize people to even laying down their lives. And this is indoctrinated into the military at every step, in everything that you do. And therefore, it is very essential to have that ethos, the military ethos, which we will speak of as we go along. You also need to lead by personal example, to become a role model. Model and behaviors that you expect from your employees must come from you also. Honesty, integrity, loyalty. You must exhibit it. It's only then that the people you command will give you that, will give you loyalty, if they see it in you. So it has to be personal example. You need to walk the talk. If, for example, you are telling your employees that there are tough times and everyone needs to make sacrifices, and to ensure that the company remains solvent, we'll all take a pay cut, then you must also take a pay cut being the boss. It's not that you give yourself a bonus and you cut everybody else's salary. So when a young officer joins a unit, what is the biggest thing that he needs to learn is how to win the respect and the loyalty of the troops you're going to command. That is the biggest task. So when you come out from the IMA and you join, like I joined an armored regiment, I knew nothing about tanks. Who teaches me about tanks? I learn from the men I am commanding. So though I am their boss, but they know more than me. Every man in the unit knows more than me when I join. So I start learning from them. And that is how you end up proving to them that you are competent, you are as good, if not better than them in everything, whether it be to do with the equipment that you're going to deal in, to do with the knowledge of your tactics, to do with sports, to do with running. You need to be ahead of them everywhere and prove it to them. And that's how you lead by personal example and win their loyalty and their respect. And for that respect, and if they respect you, they will follow you even into death. The next is transparency. Now, people can actually tell that something is happening, something is going wrong. So before the rumors start flying and productivity or whatever you're doing is impacted, leaders must tell the employees what is up. When making strategic decisions, determining organizational changes, or facing issues that impact employees, successful leaders need to be transparent with their workforce and how those matters arose, their thought process of dealing with them, and how their solutions may directly impact or not impact the people that are being led. This must all be shared. And in the military, we do this in a place called the Sainik Sammelan. It's also used to be called the Darbar earlier, but we call it the Sainik Sammelan, where the commanding officer of the unit, he sits down once a month with his entire command and he talks to them. He tells them what has happened in the past, what is the planning for the month which is coming ahead, what are the policies that are going to impact people, and how they need to follow what is happening. And then he also has a 0 hour where he leaves it open for them to ask any questions which they might have, answers to which have not been coming from other people. So this is with the topmost guy in the unit, that's the commanding officer, and the men he commands. So transparency needs to be maintained. There also needs to be good communication, because being in a leadership position can be very, very lonely. It's very lonely on the top. And often leaders make decisions in a vacuum and they rely on other people, supervisors or the messengers, to communicate these important decisions downwards. But a successful leader is one who is in a two-way communication with those people who are following him. Most of this communication which happens in corporate is non-verbal. For instance, when the leader set the example, that communicates to the people that they would not ask them to do anything that he is not willing to do himself. So this is also communication. Non-verbal communication is when you set your example. You do things and then the people who are following you know that this guy will not do anything which will not ask us to do anything which that person can't do on their own. Particularly in turbulent times, people value direct interaction. You should have direct interaction with the people who you're commanding and must remain committed to the people in the organization. For this, I'll give you the example that when you lead by personal example, how people will even follow you into certain death. And I spoke about this even the last time when I was answering the questions, although it was not part of that talk. But the name came up of Captain Vijayant Thapar. And Captain Vijayant Thapar was a young officer in the Kargil war who was to go and attack a feature the next morning, which he knew that this attack will lead to certain death. And so did those who were following him. The men whom he was commanding and taking up into the attack also knew that next morning, if we attack here, then it is going to be certain that most of us may not come back. But yet, because Vijayant Thapar himself led the attack, they followed him into death. He died. A number of them also died. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you lead by personal example, people will even follow you into death. Trust is also a fundamental behavior for any relationship. There must be trust between those who are leading and those who are following, both personal trust and professional trust. According to a study by one of the global management consultancies, there are 75 key components of employee satisfaction. Now, they found that trust and confidence in top leadership was the single most reliable predictor of employee satisfaction in any organization. And trust must be earned. Leaders can earn employee trust by helping employees understand the strategy, by informing them how they contribute to achieving key goals, by sharing information with employees on both how the company is doing and how the employee or the employee's division is doing relative to the organization direct objectives. So there has to be a regular feedback, and the feedback is the hallmark in the military. In a very basic way, every person in the military gets a feedback at least once a year on how they have been performing, and this is done in the terms of an annual confidential report. The report may be confidential or it may be shown to them. That is something which keeps varying, but there is a report on every individual at least once a year. Sometimes it happens even twice or thrice a year. So there is a regular feedback that you're getting, and that leads to a lot of opportunity for satisfaction and for course correction. There should also be compassion. The basis of good leadership is honorable character, selfless service to the organization, and compassion for the employees. And both the compassion should be both on the professional side and on the personal situations. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama had said, I call compassion the global staple for all people in every endeavor. In the eyes of the employees, what the leadership does affects the organization's objectives and the well-being. So when a person is deciding if they respect a leader, they think about the attributes rather than they see what the leader is doing. They're not seeing how effective you are or how much of productivity you've caused. They're looking at your attributes. And observation often tells the employees if the leader is honorable, can be trusted, or is a self-serving person. And if they find that you are a self-serving officer or you're a self-serving person, then they don't give you that respect. They don't give you the loyalty. They will salute you, they will listen to your orders, but that's not out of their want to do so. It's just because you are the boss. Self-awareness. Successful leaders have a very heightened sense of self-awareness. They have an understanding of themselves, their behavior and actions, and how their behavior and actions can be interpreted by those who are directly below them. Now, you have to be very, very careful of how you behave in front of the people whom you're leading. Because, like I have brought out, if they don't respect you, if they don't hold you in high esteem, if they don't look up to you, then your job of leading them in difficult situations becomes very difficult. You need to be visible. You need to get out of your office and go on to wherever your place of work is, in the work area, hold meetings, hold information sessions where everybody is invited, greet people who have joined, greet them personally, and welcome them to the company. You need to work with them. And we do a lot of that in the Army. I remember as a young officer, when I joined the Army, till I became a captain, my routine was the same as that of the men. I came in the morning, I did physical training with them. Thereafter, I worked on the tanks with them. We used to clean the tanks, wash the tanks, grease the tanks, train on the tanks, and go back. When the men left, we left, and we came back with them. So there was a lot of visibility. They saw you, they understood, and you got into that bonhomie which I spoke of, that integration of the crew. Here, of course, it's not the same. We're not talking of that kind of integration, but there is a need for visibility of the people you command. They must be able to see you on the floor of the corporate or on the floor of the factory, wherever you're working. You also need to be a mentor. You need to guide people so that they can succeed. You need to add value to the employee's experience. You need to groom them so that they can get promoted. So mentoring your employees is also very essential. And when you do that, it forms a different kind of a bonhomie between those being led and those who are leading. Know your employees. Building relationship with employees and learning about them as individuals, these are proven methods for building employee confidence and loyalty in you. So what we do in the army is, as a lieutenant, like I'll take you back because that's the time when you are actually building your base for becoming a leader. Uh, so you're commanding a troop of tanks. As a lieutenant, you command 3 tanks, which have got 17 men, and you keep something which is called a troop diary. And in that troop diary, you have every man's name listed, and each page you have his educational qualifications, whether he's married or not, how many children he has, where he comes from, what language he speaks, what is his religion, what is his monetary status. Anything and everything to do with a man is listed there. And you are expected to know all that because that is how you get to know your men, and that's how you start to empathize with them. Gaining a better understanding, set up work experiences and insist that your leadership team does the same. For example, if you require that you and your team work one shift in the operating area in the front line of whatever organization you are in, you must do it at least once a quarter. So get out of your office, get onto the front line with your workers, and do this at least once a quarter. There is no way to get to know your employees better than working with them. And I want to narrate an incident where this happens in the military, not only in our military, but across the world. So in the Second World War, I remember this book that I was reading on it, the Normandy landings. And when the Allies were getting back, planning to land back, uh, to get back onto Europe again, and the Germans were defending the shores of Normandy. And General Rommel had gone to carry out an inspection of the defenses, where he met a young lieutenant. It was winter. So he asked this lieutenant, what's been happening? So he said, so we set up the defenses, we put barbed wire, and we put this and that and the other. And because it was winter, the lieutenant was wearing gloves. So he told the lieutenant, take off your gloves. And he got him to take off his gloves to see whether his hands were scarred due to the barbed wire that was being laid, basically trying to check whether the lieutenant had also participated along with the men in laying of the barbed wire. And of course, he was glad to see that the officer also had scars, cuts on his hand, which had come due to the barbed wire which was being laid. So it's very important to do things which your rank and file is doing. I spoke of communication earlier. We need to communicate effectively because till a leader is understood, till what the leader is trying to communicate and pass on is actually understood, you will not be able to impact the people whom you're leading. And communicate all news, whether it's good news, bad news, be open, be candid, be honest, be sure that the employees have all the information they need to be able to support the company. And communication must be in all directions, in all levels of the organization. It is not just top to bottom. It is bottom to top to bottom, horizontal, everywhere. Also use appropriate and relevant methods of communication. Avoid emails and avoid other forms of written communication. If a message is critical, if it is complicated in nature and it is critical to be passed on to the people whom you're commanding, then it is better that you go and pass that message in terms of a meeting or whatever else yourself. Don't use somebody else to communicate that. So you have to be able to decipher what is it that needs to go from your mouth and what is it that you can pass in written communication and what is it that you can convey through somebody else. Also in the military, we follow something called 2 up and 2 down. And I feel if that is adopted in the corporate, it'll be very, very beneficial. Now, what is 2 up and 2 down is that if you have a person, for example, who's a major, a company commander. Now, the company commander is expected to know the job of his 2 bosses up. That means the CEO's job and his brigade commander's job. And he's also expected to know 2 jobs down. That is his platoon commander and the men which are part of the platoon. So what I'm trying to say is you are looking at 5 levels that this individual needs to know: 2 up, his own, and 2 below. Now, if you can adopt that in whichever organization you're working, you will have employees who are not only familiar with what they need to do, but they are also aware of what goals their immediate boss is setting and what goals at the higher level, the strategic level or vision the company has. Equally important are those below them. They know what the people who are even on the floor level, what their job is, and the intermediary between them and the floor level people, what their job is. So this is not easy to achieve because, unlike in the military where you rise from a lieutenant upwards, in the corporate you may have been inducted at a certain level, and therefore you were not a part of growing up right from the grassroots. But you need to make an effort to know two up and two down, and it will be very beneficial. Also, we in the military, when we project something or we say something, you make your boss look good. What I mean by that is that when the boss makes a plan, or the whoever is the leader, they make a plan, and you are receiving the plan, of course, you are expected to give your critical analysis of what is right and what is wrong with the plan, more in what is wrong with the plan and how it can improve. But the way you put it across is very, very important. You can do it in a very offensive manner, where you can probably make the boss feel, uneasy, or you can do it in a manner where the boss appreciates what you're saying and yet you manage not to offend your boss. And in the army, we are very, very particular about this because feedback is very important, but the way it is portrayed or way it is put across is equally important. So you don't need to, ruffle any feathers. And this is something that I feel organizations can actually pick up from the military. And the last point I want to talk about is embrace change. Do not brace for change. Change is the rule rather than the exception. Essentially, in today's business environment or any other time, it's not an exaggeration to say that business in the country will never be the same again. Change is inevitable. Make sure that it is the right change. And in the army, we are changing every 6 months or maybe every year, because either you are moving out, you're getting posted out, or you have your boss getting posted out, because there is normally a tenure of 2 years. And with every movement, either yours or your boss's, there is change. There is more change when you move out because no two jobs are the same. You may be in an administrative job today looking after logistics, and tomorrow you're in an operational job looking after how to make plans to attack. And third day you are in an instructional job where you are teaching. So you need to keep evolving. You need to keep redefining what you know. You need to educate yourself. You need to learn new skills, and you need to keep equipping yourself for the change role. And that is what needs to be done in the business, not maybe on a personal level, but on a conceptual level where you are looking at how the businesses are changing around you and how you need to keep evolving along with the change. I find a number of organizations don't do this. The businesses may be doing it because for them it's money, but those which are not dealing with profitability in the literal form, I think this transformation is rather slow. An example is probably our education system. With that, I've come to the end of whatever I had to say about lessons, leadership lessons from the military. If there are any questions, I'll try and take them on.
Wonderful. I think there is a lot that we are learning here about leadership, in addition to what even Brigadier Datta had shared with all of us. I have a specific question to the two up, two down approach. Right in the army, as you said, it is the ethos which binds everybody, and there is a protocol that everybody follows. And of course, they get injected into the system at the very beginning, and then they are there. Of course, the postings and everything happen, and today, you could be under one commanding officer and tomorrow could be someone else. In the corporate environment, there is so much of the number pressure that each one has, that how do you think the two up, two down can be implemented, because everybody is insecure about their own position? The boss is insecure that if my junior does better, then maybe he or she will take over their position, and vice versa. So how does one deal with that?
So really, this is not special to the corporate. Insecurity sets in every organization. It sets in the military also. When you have a smarter, officer who's junior to you, the boss, the people on top start feeling insecure because this guy has answers to everything which they may not even have answers to. So that insecurity is normal. It's a human behavior. It's not specific to corporate. Now, how you will deal with it is that in the corporate, I think it's probably easier than in the military because finally you are looking at output. You're looking at profitability. If this man, whoever is making you insecure, is also, is laying golden eggs, well, you're going to be happy having him there, even though you might be insecure about him and might be insecure from the fact that he will get more appreciation than what you might get. But overall, I think it is easier in the corporate than in the military, where there is no tangible outcome to ever be shown. And if you are the best guy who is making your boss insecure, the other person may not be as good as you, but whatever that person does will also be adequate to see it through. So I think this is a human trait which needs to be dealt with at every stage.
Right, right.
Ekta,
May
Yes, yes, Aarti, please.
Yes. A very important quality of a leader is, that they generate a lot of goodwill among their people. And for that, one has to be a little easygoing. So you've given wonderful points: honesty, integrity, loyalty, compassion. How does one cultivate the quality of being easygoing? Not everybody is easygoing by nature.
I don't know if I would agree with you with the term easygoing. Because easygoing actually means you are ignoring stuff which really matters. Because if you're translating that to professional work, what do you mean by easygoing? Just define easygoing.
Gigi, when I say easygoing, it doesn't mean that, you overlook or sweep things under the carpet. It means that you are approachable, you're friendly. And as you said, when feedback is given, you don't get very offended or you don't make it an ego play then. So that's what I mean more by easygoing, as in you have a more inclusive attitude. That's what I mean.
So I had mentioned that you need to be approachable. You need to have communication, not only top to bottom, but also bottom to top and horizontally, so that everybody is on the same grid. I think that's being easygoing, or whatever term you're using, easygoing, is probably the key to being a good leader, because people should see you as somebody they can come to and narrate their problem. And that is where I said that bonhomie has to come. If you know your people, you can empathize with them. And these problems needn't be personal only, they can be professional problems. There are problems which are happening within, those little pockets which are there in every organization. So the approachability part, the accessibility of the leader is, I think, important. And what we are talking actually is theoretical. This is idealistic. Now, if it doesn't happen, it is due to individual personalities. But surely, if you are approachable, then it'll be what you say, easygoing.
May I just continue?
Yeah.
How do you, a leader, naturally, because of his education, because of his experience, has a standing? How do you make sure your ego doesn't get in the way of leading your team?
See, ego is something which you have. Your team doesn't have it. So if you have an ego and you feel that is interfering, then it is an internal problem. I think the moment you start believing in yourself that you are boss, you don't need to prove it every day to people under your command that I am boss. So a lot of people have this habit of coming and, throwing the weight around every day because they need to continually keep They feel they need to remind the people whom they're leading that they are the boss. If you can forget that, and if you feel that the people whom you are leading understand that you are their boss, because finally you are the boss. You will write their futures. You will be the one who is giving them their perks or their, appraisals. So they understand all that. You don't need to keep proving it. That is something that you have to understand. But again, I said these are human nature things. It's to do with the way you're built. It can be taught to a certain extent. But beyond that, I don't think it can happen. And that is where the difference comes between somebody who is liked as a leader and somebody who may be more productive, but is not liked as a leader.
Yes, thank you so much. That's very true. That's the perfect answer. Thanks a lot.
Yes, Pushpa, please go ahead.
Good evening, Major General Dogra. So nice and kind of you to, be on these sessions and imparting all that you know with us. We are definitely taking back many learnings from you. I just wanted to ask you, when you spoke about transparency and the communication channel in the army, I don't know about the army. Yes, I have heard that, yes, it's very transparent and it flows down. But in our corporates, it doesn't happen. So maybe that's one, the lack of transparency and the top management not being approachable to the lower management or the middle management becomes a tussle at times. And I just want to ask you, like young officers joining the NDA, they are learning, values are being inculcated in them because they are at a very tender age. Why not in India, we inculcate such values in high school to our young boys and girls? Don't
Well,
you
I think
make a lot of difference when they walk their, path of life in any field?
Well, I think one of the reasons of going to school is to get a holistic education and not only get to know about academics. So, but what has happened in my opinion, in our education system over the years is that we are only looking at how many marks you're scoring. And we have forgotten everything else that goes with the school, whether it is learned in extracurricular activities, whether it's learned on the play field, whether it's learned due to the social interaction you have with other children. Very little time is spent on that. I remember when I was in school, we used to have a subject called moral science, where somewhere down the line it has gone away and now it is replaced by something else called EVS, or I don't know what name they use, but it is not what we were being taught that time. You were being taught how to be compassionate, how to be humane, how to be all that stuff. I found it somewhere missing from when I went through what my children were studying.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also got to do with the kind of rat race that we have put our children into now, where everybody is only clamoring for marks. And how they get those marks is not important. So the means are not important. It's the ends which are important. Everybody wants to know how many marks you got. And this then transforms even later. Today, when you ask somebody, when I talk to people, and in fact, I'm very sensitive about this topic, because when you talk to people and they say, that guy's doing very well. So I ask them, what do you mean by doing very well? Well, he's got a very good paying job. And so everything is measured. Your doing well is measured only by how much money you make. Your academic school performance is measured by how many marks you got. And nobody is looking at the holistic part of it, whether in school or in your later life. And therefore, I feel that this is something which may not, it's not easy to change, because it has evolved in our system over a period of time. I don't know if it is the same abroad. I think it is, people are, like Aarti said, more easygoing, they are more approachable, and you may not be so insecure as people are out here. I don't know the answer to your question, how you can do it in the corporate. I don't know how you can do it in the corporate, but surely in the army, we try to make it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Major General Dogra. In Singapore, like they have this compulsory, thing for children to join their forces, and there is a sense of national pride in that. That is lacking in the kids nowadays being exposed to, so much of media around. So that's what I was asking. Wouldn't it be good, some kind of exposure is given to young children?
No, I differ on this thing, because Singapore has conscription because they don't have a population who wants to join the forces. In India, when there is one vacancy, there are 10,000 people waiting to join. So it doesn't make sense to put everybody through it just because you want to discipline them or you want to inculcate some kind of a spirit in them. This thing must be done, like you said, at school level or at university level. And you can't rely on an organization which is a professional fighting force to be able to be used just to inculcate a national spirit or inculcate some qualities in people. If we were short of people, then the system, yes, then you make sure everybody joins the army, not for this reason, but because you need to serve the country. Somebody needs to be there in the army. But here there's enough. There are enough coming. And therefore, I don't think it'll ever happen. Even countries which used to have conscription earlier have done away with the system.
Thank you.
Extension to what Pushpa is asking, that this needs to be taught at a very basic level. Well, I do understand that to change the education system, probably it's going to take a hell lot of a time, and not everybody might be very passionate about really doing that. But as parents, right? As parents, how can we build leaders in our own homes? And taking them away from that whole, or rather not the children, actually taking our mindset from that whole rat race of numbers and teaching them those moral. I mean, to give you an example, there are certain things like it's okay to jump a line to get something. It is okay to litter. It is okay to throw something. I remember this was about 4 years back. We were visiting Taj Mahal, and my brother and his family were down from Hong Kong. And there were these mother-daughter walking in front of us. They had water and they threw the Bisleri bottle on the floor, whereas the dustbin was just 2 steps ahead. And my niece, who was 9 then, she said, "Bua, why are they not throwing it in the bin?" So I didn't have an answer to her. And then we actually checked them. And the look that we got was like, "Are you off your mind?" So how do we build in this? Because that also, I feel, is a leadership quality. As you said, walk the talk, be a mentor to someone. So how do we as parents really work on this and get rid of that societal pressure, the number pressure?
Let me give you an example. You find the child goes to school and they're taught, for example, that don't honk outside a hospital, don't jump a red light. This is a pedestrian crossing. Now, when he comes home and he's traveling with his father, that guy jumps the first red light. He honks outside the hospital and he doesn't care about pedestrian crossings. And the kid is confused because he has been told in school that this is what you're meant to do. But when he sees his parents, they don't follow it. And then we know how children imbibe. They imbibe from what they see their parents doing. And that is the culture that is carrying on because, like you said, the mother and daughter both were together and they didn't drop the bottle in the dustbin, they threw it on the floor. Now this girl, obviously, whatever she has done has got reinforced by her mother also doing the same thing. So I think this is a serious issue. It cannot be dealt so easily because we have grown only monetarily. We have not grown in our ethics, in our behavior, in our morals. And that is the problem which I feel dogs our country the most, is the way we behave, the way we think, and the way we look at things which maybe in other countries are just normal. Here we don't even care about them. We need to look at a deeper solution here.
True, very true. Yes, Aarti, please.
May I know how we prepare the next generation to take failure? Because failure is a very important part of moving forward.
I think preparing for failure is something that you have to be taught to realize that failure is an outcome. But we are so used to doing everything for our children. that to make sure that they don't face this failure. They want something, parents are rushing to give it to them. They are rushing to please their children and keep them happy because probably somewhere they are guilty that they didn't receive whatever they were deprived, So I think this is only a generation which is passing. Soon the children who are now being brought up with everything around them, when they have all the hygiene factors of roti, kapda, makan, which were not there when the present generation who are parents were young, then the mind starts looking at the higher qualities of life. We are discussing the higher qualities right now, but the people whom we are talking of were struggling to just get the basic roti, kapda, makan. You're chasing money all the while. When you reach a stage where you're no more chasing the money and you look at a job which gives you satisfaction and not because of what salary it gives you, then you will also start spending time on the finer aspects. This is my opinion. I have not done any research, but this is the way I think, I feel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Pratima here. So how do I relieve my son? I would be specific about my son because he is in 12th standard, right? I have started feeling that he is under a pressure that he has to be on the top. Again, I related to Aarti ma'am, what she said, that yes, he is under pressure. He's not even able to enjoy the days, enjoy his studies, what he's getting. I mean, he's always under that pressure. That is what I've been seeing. How do I remove that pressure out of him?
I feel
he's comparing himself to his peer group, the friends.
Well, I feel it's good to be under pressure as long as the pressure has a positive outcome. Now you haven't said what is negative about this pressure. You just said he's not being able to enjoy his everyday. Well, he's got enough time to enjoy what's going to happen later. But this, if the make and break is class 12, and we all know that to get a good academic, college or an institution, 12th board is very important, then it's okay for him to be under pressure because at least he's performing and he's heading in a focused manner, unless it is affecting his health. Unless you feel that the damage will be permanent because he's under pressure, he will be so badly damaged that, it's better to release the pressure. But if that is not the case, then I think you are lucky that your son is, focused on his own. Here I know children who are sitting after the kids and, blasting them the whole day, pado, but it's not there.
True.
Thank you.
So while you have mentioned the key qualities of a leader in terms of communication and being a mentor to them, being transparent and share the thought process. So basically, just be what you are and communicate it to the external person. But what are those? These are very external qualities which you exhibit. What are the internal qualities that one needs to work upon to be an effective leader?
Well, I think leadership is all about how you portray yourself to the people you lead. You may be a horrible person, but if you can convince the people you lead that you have all the qualities that they aspire in a leader, then your job is done. Now we are looking at how to become a good leader. Your intrinsic qualities that you're born with may be very difficult for you to change. You can only at best control them, stifle them up to a point. And when the chips are down, then even that restriction goes. So it's all about convincing your command that you are the man who can lead them and gaining their faith, which I feel if you follow these, it works.
Wonderful, wonderful. Come on, ladies, this is your last chance to ask your question one-on-one to General Dogra. Yes, Razina, please.
Hi, sir, I have a question. I think the most difficult time for a leader is during the annual performance appraisals. So what is called in the corporate terms. of course, I've been a leader, I've been in that position, and I know there were times I was not able to keep my entire team happy by giving everyone a promotion or giving everyone the deserved rating, because there are certain nuances of every corporate. And I'm sure every leader faces a great challenge in handling this situation. So, do you have any advice, any tips which you can share in terms of how a leader can handle the pressure himself first, and how the leader can actually manage the team and communicate so effectively that the pressure or the hard feelings which team members have can be erased in the long term?
Well, let me tell you that it's probably and something which every leader has to undergo or go through, and there is no solution to this. It's easier in the army, probably more difficult in the corporate, because in the corporate, when you say that you can't give them a good appraisal, it means that they will not get the jump or the increment which they would have got if they had a good appraisal. In the army, when you give an appraisal to a person, there is no monetary outcome. You are just handing over a good chit. Okay, you are outstanding, so are you, so are you, so are you. Everybody's outstanding. And the only person you need to tackle is your boss to explain to him how you rated everybody outstanding. And if you can do that, that person also has no issue, because there is, again, like I said, no financial implication to what you're rating. But in your case, it has a financial implication. So I don't see how you can please everybody. And therefore, as a leader, you will have to be very clear in your mind that there will be people who will be upset with you. But how you tackle them, how you probably make them realize what I have just said, that there are only, say, 5 slots which can be taken, and the balance 5 will have to be rated lower. If they can understand this mechanism, and you can somehow also convince them that you have been just and fair, and they don't suspect you that people who didn't deserve it have been favored, then I think there is a good chance that they might understand. It's only a chance, but they will be heartburn. There is no doubt about it.
Excuse me, sir. I'd like to
Yes,
come up. Okay. How do we tackle such a situation when we are stuck up? Like you said, we need to be a bit approachable for our team. Fine, we are approachable, very good, appreciated for that. But when we are overliked by the people, our seniors are not happy with it. They every time ask us to have limits between us and our group, what they say. So how do we tackle this? Because we are sandwiched between both.
So this is again it's a human, something to do with the human nature, where you don't want people below you getting too cozy with those whom they are dealing with, because you are feeling insecure about what is happening out there. I don't see any solutions to this, except that you need to be tactful when you deal with people above you and below you, because like they say in Hindi, पानी में रह के मगरमच्छ के साथ दुश्मनी नहीं कर सकते. So you have to look at the situation you're in. You have to understand what your boss wants, and you have to realign your functioning to meet what you want to do, and align it to as best as you can with what your boss also expects. So this is a very fine tuning that you'll have to do. There is no answer to this. Because if your boss says you don't communicate with your people, you can't stop communicating, but you can do it in a very tactful manner where you don't ruffle feathers. This is my advice.
Any example that you can share from real life that you would have experienced, wherein, Aarti, you want to ask something?
Yeah, please, may I? In keeping with the same question, we need to cultivate a person who can take up our position. Leaders build leaders. So tell me, where ego is involved, where there is a lot of competition, how does a leader build a second in command and manage to step back? Maybe it's more defined in the army, but not so in corporate life.
No, you
So
don't.
how do you?
You don't step back. You build the person, but you don't step back. You are the mentor and you are mentoring somebody. And therefore, you treat that somebody like somebody you mentored. You brought him up to a level, and that person steps in only when you are gone or you have gone higher, and that person takes your slot. But whilst you're there, you don't step back and let that person take over. So I don't think that happens anywhere.
But you do need to give them some chances to perform or to get a feel of what it takes. So there are times when you do need to put them in the forefront so they can, do something and understand what it feels like to be in that job.
Yeah, so that's delegation. For
Yes.
example, let's take a school, and there is a principal who wants to mentor somebody to also, become as good. Or when she goes on chutti or he goes on leave, that person can, do an equally good job. So maybe there is a event coming up where you ask that person to prepare a plan, to present it to you. You take an overview of and approve whatever is happening, and then just step back and say, okay, now you conduct this event. And once it's conducted, you give a feedback whether it was good, bad, or ugly. So there are techniques where you do mentor people, give them an opportunity to experience what has to be experienced, but they must understand that this is only for mentoring them. If they become too big for their boots, then you will have to put them in their place.
Yes.
You will have to bring them down to Mother Earth again to say that you are only being mentored. You are not yet there. Okay, so this is all to do with leadership. You will have to use these techniques very tactfully because you're dealing with human resource. There is no simple answer.
No. Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll tell you, in the army, there is a lot of tendency amongst officers to start taking their seniors for granted. They get too familiar. So we are taught that you must be friendly, but not familiar. There's a very fine line between the two.
Yes.
Friendliness shows that, there's bonhomie. You respect each other. Familiarity, like they say, breeds contempt.
Yes.
The moment you become familiar, you start losing respect for each other's space, each other's performance. So that is fine line has to be brought up everywhere. And I was brought up believing that there is on office time and off office time. When you are at work, you may be a day apart from each other in your seniority, but whoever is senior is boss, and you listen to that person, irrespective of how senior. The moment you're off, you are friends.
Yes.
Then you have a drink together, you party together, but you still don't get familiar.
Yes. And also you don't get taken for granted in the process.
So the moment you start getting taken for granted, you will find then people will have different techniques to tell you how to get you back in your thing. There may be a cold, silence, give you the cold treatment for some time, sideline you for a time being. And there are so many techniques that you can adopt.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm signing off. Thank you all.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
I was asking any real example where you could share, because as a leader, it is also very important to motivate people. Though when you are in a situation of crisis and when you are in action, there is no such thing that a motivation needs to come in. But many times, people in that environment of, say, of crisis or war may feel a little pulled down. So as a leader, if any experience you could share where how you motivated the team to kind of keep the josh high.
Well, I think this happens with us every day in every walk of life. It's not only the army, where you need to motivate the people to pull together in the direction that you as a leader want them to go. So let's take a simple example of a sports field where you may have suffered a couple of goals and your team, which thought they were the best, their morale is down. Now you need to speak to them and reach out to them to infuse them with that confidence that, no, you can do it. So there are techniques like in every other walk where you can, you speak to them, tell them, maybe even, I will say, you can taunt them. So you can use negative criticism to build up that fire that tum kehte ho, hum, say like in my regiment, we have Jats, Rajput and Khalsa, one squadron each. And if say I'm commanding the 6th squadron, which I did throughout, and I was now to, fire up these guys because they were losing. So you tell them, you guys say, okay, one Khalsa is equal to so many lakh. And here you guys are not being able to even move. So stuff like that, you can pick up the appropriate stuff to tell them based on who they are, what is their mission, and you can infuse them with that kind of thing. So I can't give you any specific example like that, of my feet.
Of course, yeah. Perfect. So indeed, negative reinforcement definitely helps, to kind of charge you up. And I think all those points that you shared about being, the two-way process of communication, being a mentor, being transparent, and sharing your thoughts before you take any important decision, rather than just kind of shoving the decision on them that okay, this is what needs to be done. I think that really helps in all of us to be better leaders at our respective whether we are in the corporate world or we are entrepreneurs ourselves. So indeed, very, very helpful. Any other questions?
I also want to add that I think anger is a very, very important tool. Anger should be used as a tool. I remember my entire service, I used to lose my cool to show people that I'm angry. It may not have angered me actually, because when you are angry, you are passing a message. It's communication that I'm not happy with what's happening. Actually, you may not be angry. You may not be in that fit of rage which you are pretending to be in, but you're doing it to make an impact to the people whom you are passing that message on to. So it's also a tool which needs to be used very wisely, and it can have a good impact. Our parents do it all the time. You're angry with a child, you tell them, tum to kisi kaam ke nahi ho, tum useless ho, kade ho. Now, all that is not because they really mean to say that you are like that, but these are all tools that you use to infuse your children with the thing, okay, this is what my parents think, okay, I must do better.
That's a feeling of deja vu. I'm sure for a lot of us have a smile on our face. Indeed. So if there are no questions, General Dogra, thank you so much for being with us all through January. And you may feel that the number of people were less, but believe me, they all watched this later on. Ela had a bit of a personal emergency today. That's why she's not here, but she's been watching it over Facebook. And we'd like to present you a certificate of appreciation in the virtual environment. So that's the thing that we can do. Just allow me a second, please.
Thank you.
Is my screen visible?
Very much.
So thank you so much on behalf of Ela and myself. I will share this certificate with you, and it was indeed a pleasure to have you talk to us, take us through your journey, for being so candid, for patiently answering each and every question, and being very, very motivative to all of us. And I don't think this is going to be the only time that we're going to have you on MQ. I have been watching some of General Dogra's videos and interviews, and indeed they're very, very motivating. He has his Instagram handle and his Facebook page. Do go through it, his YouTube channel also. And for all of you, there is a book being written on him, and a lot is there, which shall be disclosed at a gradual time whenever it is up and ready. But he's the man in front of us, the Iron Man. And truly, I think we all really owe you for spending that quality time with us and sharing all those insights. Personally, it has really impacted me, and you have been the talk of the conversation in our house, be it with my husband or my brother or anybody else. And we are hoping that we are also able to achieve some of our dreams. So you've really inspired all of us here. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to be here and answer all the fantastic questions and queries which come to the best of whatever I could. Love to be back here anytime. See you all. Have a great day ahead, and good luck. Godspeed.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you all the participants. We are very delighted to also announce our series for February, which what and how it is would be shared a little later. But just to give you a little bit of a heads up, the next speaker for a session has been one of the active participants with us, which is Rezina Dennis, who is a coach, who is a NLP practitioner, and she also helps children live their dream of becoming authors. So there will be a lot that would be, spoken by Rezina. Just a teeny weeny hint for all of you who have children of any age would definitely benefit from this series, because this series that we are just concluding today was all about you, where you learned how you can motivate yourself, how you can let go of your past and live in the moment, and how it is important to build that mental endurance and be effective leaders. Next would be all about you as a parent, and what it would be, we will share with you very soon. Do shower your love and affection the way you all have been, and we hope that NCube is able to make a difference. Even to one person, we will be delighted that we have achieved something that we really wanted to. So thank you so much, and looking forward to Rezina series in the month of February. So thank you all and take care.
See you all.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.